Welcome back, investor. We've got another episode of Passive Income Adventures with George Stefanou. He is a certified financial planner and a specialist in helping accredited investors. So if you have a net worth over $1 million, or if you make $200,000 a year by yourself, or if you and your spouse together make $300,000, you're considered an accredited investor, and it gives you access to a wider variety of things that you can invest in private markets. And public markets tend to be they have to be very well certified and to get on an exchange where a teenager could purchase it, right? And so private markets don't undergo the same type of regulations. And so in exchange for that, the Securities and Exchange Commission asks us to reasonably verify that the investors who are in our private deals are accredited or some other sort of certification. So accredited is kind of the easiest one to deal with. And George really helps families in that situation. I make it sound like it's a medical problem, in that opportunity to be able to navigate things as they kind of start to get a little bit more complex in that way. So thank you so much for coming on the show with us, George, today. This is something that I really needed when we kind of crossed that threshold in our own family, because we were used to being kind of like the frugal poor Dave Ramsey people. And I didn't really feel that like I had a lot of guidance in like how to be a millionaire, and which sounds ridiculous. It sounds like, but it is a great problem to have. But at the same time, it brings with it the ability to make mistakes. Those consequences get bigger. So I appreciate you coming on the show today to walk us through this.
No, thanks for having me. That's exactly why I wrote the book and to Commonwealth, and exactly the topics that we talk about in there, really going from maybe that Dave Ramsey mindset of that scarcity mindset to how do we change to a mindset of abundance and giving yourself permission to spend through a process so that you can have that conviction to finally enjoy the fruits of your labor or the scarcity that you've done along your life, and hopefully pass that legacy on to the next generation and really create a wealth that's lasting, that can outlast even yourself.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like it's like privilege problems, first world problems. It's like, oh, I don't know how to be a millionaire, right? But at the same time, because of the way that we were raised, and because of that, we were like the ultimate example of good is the enemy of great. Things are pretty good. So just don't rock any boats, right? And so learning how to deal with these kinds of financial burdens has been a little bit of an uphill. And I had a hard time convincing my husband that we even wanted to go this direction. Like, I really want to invest. I really want to like break through and work on becoming wealthy, because he knew it came with complexity, and it also came with like moral implications for him. Like, wealthy people are greedy and they just want to get wealthy just by stepping on other people. He had I think I had some of that as well. To be able to say, like, think about the good that we can do if we don't have to work and we have money to actually finance our good intentions. And that was what really got us over the hump to say, like, we're going to go after this. We're going to take on the new learning, the complexity of it, because we had this passion to go out and do good. And I find that like most people in my position align with that. So can you talk to that a little bit about the abundance mindset of wealth in general, and not feeling like it's either evil or too difficult?
Yeah. So, I mean, I talked directly about that in the book. The first chapter is even um, the nuance of even that word millionaire, probably because of generations in the past.
Where it
First
used to
off,
fit something.
listen, yes, it used to mean a whole lot more than it does today, right?
Yeah.
So the truth is, due to the inflation and just there's a lot more millionaires, and in fact, I mean, to retire comfortably, it's in large
Like,
cities in America, it's almost a necessity to do so. It seems. So depending on your expenses, all that kind of stuff, but there is a little bit of a nuance. There's a little bit of a worry that people don't want to be seen as this evil billionaire, the Scrooge McDuck or whatever it may be, that they remember growing up. Uh, and I open in the book a story about my own father. And so he was an immigrant from Greece. He has a fourth grade education, came over here to make some bucks and finally send some money back home so that he could buy a house in the local city. He was from a very, very small farmland, and there was generations of farmers and some cherry trees and some goat farming and things like that. And you just never left. Maybe you did a little bit of a stint in the military and you came back and just helped out in the family farm, and that was it. So in order to get a real job, you had to live in the city, but in order to move to the city, you had to have money. And it was just,
yeah.
it was a perpetual issue. So he ended up coming to America, saving money in a very, very frugal mindset, living above the restaurant that he worked in a little apartment above there, sending money back to purchase. There was a little hiccup on the way. The hiccup happened to be myself. And so he kind of stayed in America as a result of finding my mom and getting married and kind of settling down with things. But he eventually had that American dream. He'd establish it here in the US. He did some of it through real estate, and he never recognized himself as a millionaire. And in fact, when his realtor sat down and had the conversation with him and just saying as he was making his infamous deals that he would do, just mentioned passively, you're a millionaire, right? And
Yeah.
he just kind of was taken aback by the whole, what do you mean I'm a millionaire? He's like, yeah, you have $1 million in just your real estate portfolio alone. And he's like, well, I guess I am, and so it was just a different thing. He never put those things together. So many folks, they suffer with that mindset because the thought process is, hey, you have to be a bad guy. But the truthful part of it is the wealthy in America, even that 1% that nobody wants to be or wants to claim that they're part of, they're actually the most generous as far as the amount of giving because of the ability that it gives them, the job creation it's able to provide for others, the amount of taxes that are paid. I mean, there's lots of things that are a good result of having those assets too. And that being said, nothing to take away from those who came from modest beginnings like ourselves, perhaps, and growing up with them. They also, perhaps from a percentage standpoint, are even more generous. But both, it's not an either or a negative populist or a positive populist. Everything makes the whole system run and work. And it's just, if you've made those sacrifices, you've made it in America, then have the right to enjoy it. And sometimes it's framing that mindset to do so and not having to wait. There's a shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves kind of mindset where people don't want to spend money. The second generation with the adage is, if you don't fly first class, then your kids will, which is great. Maybe that was the intent, but maybe both of you can ride business class. There's a happy medium in between the two. So we talk about all of that as well.
Yeah. I have 6 kids. And when we first started down this path, I was zero interested in legacy wealth because it was like, I just don't feel like sometimes that's good for them to have things handed to them. And now I feel very tasked with legacy wealth from a standpoint of education, exposure, and experience versus just giving them stuff. So I don't know. I mean, your perspective changes as your situation changes. So you mentioned the book, the Two Commonwealth. Can you give us a framework in that book for who is the person who should be reading that book and give us the pillars that they will learn from reading it?
Yeah. So it's really for anyone that has a net worth between 1 and 30 million. You get above 30 million, we really need to talk a lot more about estate planning to the next degree and the estate inheritance tax and all that the book doesn't go deeply into. It's just a whole other nuance that doesn't apply to most Americans. But there is a growing populace of this millionaire set where people are working class citizens and maybe they just put away into their 401k or they had stock options that they had available, or they bought some property, or they had some inheritance, and things stacked together. And all of a sudden, now their situation has become more complex than they realize. It affords them the opportunity to do some advanced planning around taxation and estate planning, as well as their investments, as you mentioned, perhaps the private placements and things like that are available to them as well. But the truth is, in America, we don't even teach basic, balancing your checkbook, much less any of how the tax code works or any of that stuff works. So really, this is the venture of lots of do-it-yourself books out there, lots of things that people talk about, but many people, most books are focused on how to become a millionaire, but not what to do once you get there. And so this really was centered around those, creating a framework around it. I selfishly call the framework SWIM, as in swim lessons, called Stefanou Wealth and Investment Management lessons. But it's also a nod to my dad, who is from Greece, a country known well for its beaches, but ironically never learned to swim himself physically. But he'd convinced himself he was swimming in the 3-foot section of pools and such. But from a financial standpoint, really did learn how to thrive and swim, and we got to see it through his eyes, learning that. And he still struggles embracing the mindset of spending money on just about anything, but he's slowly learning from a guy that didn't know how to or grew up not having indoor plumbing or electricity, to
Mm.
see him text message and now drive a full self-driving car with, or at least that's what the Tesla claims it to be, is pretty incredible for a spectrum during a lifetime to see to fruition. So that's really the framework of the book of how to do so. And it asks questions. It goes through material that might be a little on the deeper end sometimes, but it tries to make it applicable through real client stories that I've had over the years. My dad's own personal story, my own stories in there, and then wrapping it up in those swim lessons where it's 5 questions at the end of each chapter on how to apply the material you just learned to yourself, open-ended questions, and going to those applicable advisors to make sure that you've put it in place if you're already working with those advisors or if you're doing it yourself.
Okay, perfect. So can you walk us through what some of those predicted stages look like as the book kind of outlines so people can kind of figure out where on this path are they currently falling?
Yeah. So, what first kind of goes into the storytelling of maybe what your path might have been to get there. Then realizing, you know, um, the old advertisement. I think it was Fidelity back in the day, the green line, and figuring out what your number was. And
Mhm.
everybody, maybe it was an ING commercial that had everybody had a number they were carrying around. So what is that number? How do you, yeah,
I'll have
which
to
is
look it
Voya
up.
now or whatever the company is now.
Yeah.
But and so we have tools like the back of the napkin 4% rule that, I'm sure you've had guests in your
Mhm.
podcast talk about before. And so multiplying your annual income plus a little bit of inflation times 25, getting you to that number of, okay, maybe that's your number, but that's your number to meet maybe your needs, but really then exploring what are your wants and your wishes? What's that excess that you've accomplished? And then identifying what are some of those things that are most important to you. And it's different for each person. For some people, going on vacation is a need in their eyes. Some it's a want, some it's a wish. Some it's donations, maybe it's paying for a wedding, paying for a college education, whatever it may be, that their thought processes are, and lining those up. And then after that, kind of stress testing some of those things and Monte Carlo analysis, all that kind of stuff. Then looking at investments through a different kind of scope and realizing, I liken investments to an investment highway. And where do your investments fall on the highway? How fast are they really going? What's the level of risk that you're taking? And what does diversification really mean? And how can you utilize that highway, especially during, congestion on the highway, to your advantage, and making sure you have investments that go on different speeds so that you have different areas that you can pull from. Talks about withdrawal strategies in order to give yourself ultimately at the end of the day, taking the variability of the markets and all the risk that's in there and trying to create some level of confidence so that you can create a withdrawal strategy so you can then give yourself that permission to spend. And then we go around taxation, how to properly put those assets in the right buckets in order to get the proper taxation, how to utilize the tax code to your advantage, things like Roth conversions and all of those kind of things are discussed. We talk about asset protection then as a layer, how to protect those assets that you now have through titling, proper insurance coverages, all that. And then for those of you that are business owners tend to have their primary investment be their business because they get the ROI on it. They have that sweat equity that's in there and they understand it. We talk a lot throughout the book about simply understanding what you're investing in. It's really funny. I don't think I've come across a client yet who doesn't, to some extent, call themselves a conservative investor. And then you look at their portfolio and it's anything but a conservative. You think conservative, oh, they're all in cash. No, they'll have some of the biggest risk out there. They're all in crypto or they're all in gold or they're all in whatever. And they think that that's conservative, or they're all in real estate or they're all in their company stock. Because what to them conservatism means, and what I've come to understand it, is through education. It's things they understand. So the book really tries to provide you with the education so you understand what a true diversified portfolio is, so you can attack it with confidence and not this question mark. Because once you take the quote unquote market out of the market, it doesn't become scary. And you realize that the sole purpose of the markets are aligned with your purpose, which is to grow beyond inflation and to get a reasonable return and have confidence to go ahead and spend money, because that's what all of those people are doing as well. So these evil millionaires that are out there, so to speak, the truth is the only way that the everyday Joe gets a piece of that is by owning a company, either starting your own business or owning some shares or a portion of such a business. And so we talk about that throughout. And then just the mindset of then even towards the end of your life, we talked a little bit about the scams that are out there, the targets that might be on your back, and
Mhm.
how to protect against some of those things, especially as you go on to your older years and the legacy of wills, those things. How do you protect your family around that, and doing those family meetings and passing on probably the most important or highest value asset, which is that same education that we talked about, to the next generation, because many people, the second or third generation, ends up squandering it because they don't see it, or they learn to hate the money. There's lots of families that they see mom and dad working so hard that I don't want anything like how to, I know we went on crazy vacations, but we talk about, I talk often to clients and folks about the different payments that are out there. And it's interesting that we use the expression pay attention. And that's
Mhm.
probably the biggest payment that we can make, is our attention, right? So we can go on a trip. Perhaps we go skiing with our family. We made a payment in time. We took time off of work. We made a payment in the cost. And we did that. Maybe we paid our energy because we decided to go down the black diamonds. But if we left our kids at the bunny slopes and we didn't pay any attention to them, then we really spent a lot of money to actually ruin that relationship some and take some of that equity from that relationship away, as opposed to maybe just taking the day off and sitting down with them, or maybe just evening meals together or playing cards together. It doesn't cost much time or money, but that attention pays huge dividends. So we talk about memory dividends, and not just gifting assets to kids, which are great. That's all fine, but gifting memories. And maybe it's the family vacations that you plan together and pay for the next generation or the third generation, or experiences that you get to have, and what that pays for you long term, which you look back on those dividends of those memories, and those are far greater because they continue to pay out the duration of your lifetime and into the next generations.
Yeah, definitely. It's such great points there. I mean, although I do feel like as a parent of young adult children, there's no way that you can do this right. It's like very
Right.
frugal on the one end, and then you're very not frugal on the other end. And either way, it becomes a negative experience. And so I think that's probably why I wasn't that into the legacy side of things, because I just, being a child and having parents myself, I knew that there was just no way I was gonna do this right or escape with them. Wow, they do such a great job until maybe they're in their 40s. I don't know when that happens, but it's such an interesting standpoint, because the psychology or the behavior around personal finance uh, leads a lot of what we do, and focusing on paying attention to our kids and being present with their eyes focused on them. Anybody of any level of wealth can do that, but the parent who is affluent can buy them a lot of stuff, and they think that that's a substitute for the time. I think that's actually one of the, not diagnostic, but it's one of the red flags for a narcissist who tries to bring in a lot of gifts and fancy vacations and things like that, but they're not giving the time. So I think that wealthy people can tend to fall into that trap very, very easily, because they didn't have that growing up and they wanted it so much that then they want to give that to their kids, and their kids really just want to play board games, or go to McDonald's. Honestly, it can be so much simpler than people make it.
Well, you see it with it's weird. We kind of impress materialism onto the next generation, and I can prove it to you because if you've ever had a toddler, and you buy them a toy, um, they tend to play with the box more than the toy itself. So you have to like show them that that's even a thing, and then eventually they get commercials, et cetera, all those bright colors. Then they want the toys or whatever. But we kind of impressed that on them, right? They just want to spend time with us, right? And that's where we get most of our joy too. But I think you're right. We live vicariously because we think that we wanted the stuff that we didn't have. So we give them the stuff. But in order to give them more stuff, we take away more time because we're more focused on the work or whatever to get more stuff. And it's sad. But that's the perpetuity of materialism. And I think that's inherent. That's the world we live in. And taking a step back, realizing that, it's interesting as a financial advisor, secularly outside of being an author is, find myself far less of an investment analyst sometimes, or any of those kind of things, or even a financial planner, and more so a behavioral therapist, right? And just a family
Yes.
therapist and talking through that. And I think there's a ton of value. I think we talk about it in the book when you're looking for an advisor, sure, you of course need the IQ section. If you don't have the IQ, then yeah, that's the baseline. But really, a good financial advisor has all that EQ that everybody was talking about, that emotional quotient, that idea of being able to walk through, make you feel heard. I had a conversation this morning with someone who was really just discussing with me their fears, and they acknowledge their fears are probably pretty far fetched, that the government's going to shut down. They're not going to give you access to your money. And what do I do? How do I diversify from that? All this kind of stuff. And it's interesting. Sometimes I'll talk to clients and they're really worried about the big bad government. And, there's some merits to that. But then what they go and do is put it all in the bank with FDIC insurance that's backed by the big bad government that they're worried about failing. So, it doesn't make sense. It was kind of like in, I think, 2000, oh man, I forget the debt credit downgrade crisis of 2010 or 2011, the summer there. I remember when the US debt was first downgraded. And I think France was one of the only countries that were like AAA rated. And instead of people going and buying bonds of France, they were buying US debt because that was the reserve currency of the world. They buy US debt and interest rates actually went down, and then the price of the debt went up because of that, because they were buying the same thing they were worried about failing. So it's an interesting conundrum that we're in sometimes. So sometimes walking people through that reality and what the opportunities are out there can be extremely beneficial. So anyways.
Yeah. Okay. So you said it. I think there's a foundational level of understanding that the human side of things is very, very important. You got to spend time with the people you love, not just take them places or buy them things. If you don't have that foundation, I don't feel like most of the rest of this even matters. But then you talk about the emotional foundations of making sound decisions. So without glossing over that, I feel like we have stressed that, but I want to say like that in and of itself is a lifelong pursuit. So where I'm going to move on to some of the more tactical stuff, but I really want to put a strong urging there that this emotional intelligence surrounding money and the time with people that you value is the foundation. That's the paramount, right? So upon that foundation, granted, if you have the ability to continue to emotionally grow and mature and look at yourself hard in the mirror and get yourself through the kid's perspective and all the things we're talking about, then what? What is the first thing somebody does when they have that moment where they're like, I think we might be high net worth? Like that moment for me, I think our net worth was about $500,000. And I was talking to a financial advisor trying to hire somebody, thinking, do I even need to hire somebody? And he said something about high net worth folks like yourselves. And I just remember that same moment, like, no, we're not high net worth, right? So that first moment when someone's like, I think we're high net worth. What next?
Yeah, sure. So there's a few things, right? There's some baseline financial planning aspects, right? So if you have high net worth, especially if you have high income or somebody's dependent on your income, then making sure that there's an insurance basis on that, right? So there's the baseline insurance on your own life, some term life insurance, all that kind of stuff. But there's insurance on protecting the assets that you have, because now that becomes a consideration. And so perhaps it's, making sure you have the proper property and casualty insurances, maybe umbrella coverage, liability, how your assets titled. So now you might have a target in your back, right? Somebody, nobody's suing you if you don't have nobody wants to bleed a turnip. So Morgan & Morgan isn't coming after you if you don't have any money. I know we're in Florida, although Morgan's in lots of things. So maybe that resonates with a lot of your listeners, but, so you have that to consider in there. But what I would tell you is start spending some money on things that do matter. And that can be different for different people. I talk about in the book, my dad, who's, in retirement now, and he spent an entire year negotiating with different contractors. We're talking about for a couple $1,000s difference variance on the porch. I'm getting a front porch. And he wanted a front porch because, full disclosure. So dad, unfortunately, he's got Parkinson's, mom has epilepsy. Their health is, and this is true of anybody, regardless of health, your healthiest days are not ahead of you, right? So you're not going to be getting any healthier usually once you're into retirement, typically. And so a porch would have been safe. It would give them enjoyment, get some indoors, outdoors of the place that they have up in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. And we just tried to get him to do it. And he spent an entire year doing so. That's a year lost of that enjoyment of that. And for what? Maybe $2,000 savings. And then with inflation, he ended up going backwards anyways. And it was just this perpetual issue that was with him. And so I talk to folks sometimes and they'll say, I remember when I first had enough money to start paying somebody to do my lawn. I started out my first job cutting lawns, right? You have somebody pay your, cut your lawn. And then people started looking down at you, But for me, it's getting back that Saturday where I have my energy and my time and I could hang out with my daughters when they were really little. Now there's a part of me that says, maybe I might at least a portion of that yard work or whatever I want to do with them as a family because it's an
Yeah.
activity. So there's two sides of that. So it's either buying back the time or spending it or doing an activity that's, there's a sense of accomplishment and pride. My kids probably, they're teenagers now. Hopefully one day they come into the business or whatever, but it's not like I can invite them to sit down and help build out a financial plan. That's just not what they're going to
Yeah.
do right now with someone. But they will help me perhaps organize the garage, or do something together that they can see the fruits and their accomplishment in doing so. But other things, the nuances, you know, pay somebody to do so. So spend some time, spend some money on getting some of that time back. And some of that, I talk about it throughout the book, and it's not a pitch. Obviously, I'm biased here, but hiring a financial advisor to outsource so you're not overly thinking about all of this all the
Mhm.
time. So you can have some peace of mind and you're not sitting there, watching, CNBC all day long or, tracking, things online or charting or whatever it may be. If that's your hobby, that's one thing, but a lot of times it can just cause more and more anxiety. And usually it'll cause the opposite to occur. I think there was a study done. I want to say it was Fidelity back in the day that um, self-directed accounts actually were far inferior to those of people who just have happened to pass away, dead people's accounts that had been abandoned and forgotten about because there wasn't activity. People weren't going in there and messing with stuff all the time and doing stuff, things. So it was just an interesting kind of conjure with that. So spend money on things that give you back time. Don't spend time on things that are going to increase your anxieties on things. And we talk about in the book, even with expenses, right? So large expenses, buying a boat because you think, hey, I'm going to spend more time with family. I'll buy the boat. And so when I'll buy the lake house and I'll get a dock and then I'll get the boat. And then we'll spend more time together. I'll fix the problem of us not spending family vacations well together by doing all that. But instead, you're working all year. So when you get to the lake house, there's things to fix. The boat doesn't work. You're repairing things. The dock needs reparation, all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
it's a mess. And so we grow up perhaps, or we created our wealth by maybe the Dave Ramsey method where he doesn't call things a lease. He calls it a fleece, right? Like, oh, never lease something. Yes, it's a fleece. That's what a waste of money. And perhaps it is for some. But, I talk about in the book, even boat rental clubs, right? So where you can pay $300-$400 a month, which in Orlando is the cost of what it'd be just to store the boat anyways. And now you can go on, go off. You don't have to worry about cleaning the boat. You don't have to worry about it working. You just pay them for the gas that day. And not only here, you can travel anywhere in the world and there's a boat waiting for you that you can take out and truly enjoy with your family if boating is your thing. And if you
Yeah.
catch yourself doing that all the time, then buy the boat. Okay. If that's really that. Same thing with RVs, rent it, go try it. Airbnb for an area or rent long-term rentals, or short-term rentals, even, in communities before you can vacation anywhere in the US and fall in love with just about any town after a week. Spend a month there and see if you really like it. Spend a season there. See if you really spend an off season there. See if this is really for you before you commit and make a false move with it. So we talk about the expenses and really how much some of those things cost, even though you may put it in your head that this is an asset. I bought an asset. I would never rent. I would always buy. Well, maybe that's a poor financial decision and really poor investment with your time. And so reframing some of those mindsets, that's really what that book, To Commonwealth, is about. And
Okay.
thinking through your investments, your taxes, and your estate strategies in a different manner that's realistic and not just maybe based on old adages or stories that were told to you that may be out of context now. So we talk those things. People applaud their neighbors when weird, right? They say things like congratulations whenever you show your neighbor your new truck. Congrats, a depreciating asset that you paid top dollar for, all that stuff. But you kind of doom scroll and you see your friends on vacation in, Europe, and you're like, oh yeah, you're on vacation again. We should be applauding that, not the truck, right? So yet sometimes we have our priorities misaligned.
Yeah. It reminds me of that, the no sacred cows philosophy, where you get to a certain point and you have to reevaluate your priorities. And you're talking about priorities of you can buy what you want because we're so long-term minded that we would rather own everything and never rent anything because renting is throwing away money. Because we have an amazing ability for delayed gratification and long-term thinking. And I think that's why that's probably, if I had to pick one reason why people become wealthy, it's that. It's not personality. It's not education. It's just an ability to really think long-term and delay gratification. So for those of you out there listening who are not yet able to apply anything we're saying because you haven't really hit there yet. Develop that, and then you will find yourself in this chair a little sooner than you expect. But the flip side of that is then we don't spend money on anything. And so what you're talking about is reprioritizing, uh, buying what is really, really important to you, and then not buying things that are not important to you. And so for years, we've been not buying anything, right? We do not care about what the Joneses think. We do not think it's congrats to buy a truck. We don't have stuff like that. We're the millionaire next door type of people.
Yep.
And so that first time when you're like, I want to take the family to Hawaii, so we're going to go. Like, and we are going to do this. Those types of moments of being able to reprioritize and really think about that it is very, very important. But at the same time, like once that you got the foundation where it's like time and all that is more, and then the reprioritizing of how you're going to spend your money. Let's take us up a level above that as we're kind of finishing up with some of the most complicated things that people have to face when they are doing their wealth management. What are some of those things that after the show that either they reach out to you for, or they're going to do a deep dive on more research for things that really tend to trip people up because it's more complicated than what they're used to dealing? Can you list out some of those things so they kind of know what to expect and know what to research?
Yeah. So I think it is what really, your diversification should be, right? So
Okay.
there's a lot of rules of thumb out there. And so there used to be an old thing that, hey, take your age minus 100 or 100 minus your age, and
Yeah.
that should be your allocation to stocks. What in the world is that about? Like, that's not guided towards an individual and their circumstances at all. What is age? 60 to some person is, if you told my kids that, you're 60, you're dead,
Yeah.
in their eyes, you got no like, look, it's like that old saying, who wants to be 100? The guy that's 99, that's who wants to be 100.
Yeah.
So, so figure out what your situation is. And so a lot of the times, we talk about these distribution levels in the book, et cetera. What is your confidence level? How much do you want in assets that don't move with the markets or perhaps have a negative correlation? Maybe it's bonds or CDs or cash and those kind of things. Not keeping too much and not keeping too little. So perhaps having, at least whatever that baseline is of however many years worth of spending to give you enough confidence to weather a downturn in the market, but not more than that, not less than that, without having some tacticalness to it. Have a plan of attack and create it your own investment policy statement in which if the market does this, I do this. And it's
Okay.
just, I go back to it and I check it and that's what I do. I don't change that because of what I've heard on the news or how I feel, because we always think that this time is different and eventually it will be different. But if it's really different and good quality companies and investments can't make money, then the right investment was to get a bomb shelter and some chickens
Yeah.
and, all that dry goods and all that stuff. And unless you're ready to take that perspective and do that, which maybe there's some people out there, I know there's whole stores about or shows about that out there. If you're not ready to do that and instead you chuckle at that, you're like, you're right, then get on with living. Like, go ahead and do it. Put your parameters in place and get that in there. Make sure that you're optimized on things like taxes, because that's a cost that you can control.
Mhm.
A lot of the times it moves all the time. You have to be abreast of that or hire that out. So you work with somebody who's a professional that does keep abreast of it. I mean, things are changing even January 26th. Now there's a whole new set of tax laws that are in effect around giving and all kinds of stuff that's part of that. And then your estate plan, whether it's the limits, whether it's asset protection, all of those things, make sure you have guidance around those things too. So I don't know, somewhere in there was hopefully an answer to your question. But you got to think through things,
Yeah.
beyond just the headlines that are out there and make it applicable to you. And a lot of that time, it means sitting down with somebody that you can respect and understand and trust, has that IQ and that EQ to do so. Because I look at a financial advisor, not that we're the end all be all, and not to belittle the profession too much, but it's kind of online with a personal trainer, right? We all know we're supposed to eat better and we're supposed to exercise. We know how to do it. We could do YouTube it very easily, but do we have the discipline to actually follow through with it? And instead of it just being a mistake where it could cost you an extra 3, 4, 500 calories, it could be a mistake that you're costing yourself $3, 4, 500,000. And recognizing that, why are we insuring everything else we do? We'll insure that, $20,000 Honda Civic that we have, but we're not insuring our portfolio by, at least insulating with some professional advice. But it happens. I talked to my dad last week and he's selling a property and it's somebody was offered him a cash offer and he's writing this contract. He's like, hey, can you review this contract for me? I'm not an attorney, Dad. I'll throw it in ChatGPT. It's not my recommendation to do that. Go hire an attorney. Well, how much is that going to cost me? A few $100s for the hour. You think it's worth it? You're talking about a several $100,000 transaction. I would have some professional eyes on it just so you have the peace of mind. But that's the status that sometimes we get caught into. I had a client, I'll never forget, one of my first instances with this was I made the client too much money. They made a significant amount of money. They have a very significant portfolio, and it was several $100,000 in a very conservative investment. And it cost them $20,000 in subsidies for their healthcare insurance as a result. They were really upset that they lost the $20,000 subsidy. They would have rather not made the $400,000 or so, which is an unfortunate consequence. So sometimes we have to re-examine things, take a step back. And, we talk about that within the book that see the bigger picture. It's not all about getting a good deal. It's about what are you accomplishing and what is your return on what you're doing at the end of the day.
Yeah. Gosh. I think it's kind of like, some people I knew, they were on heavy public assistance, and it was like they got a job to get off public assistance, but then they lost all their assistance and they were poorer than they were before. And they're like, I don't understand. At what point does it make sense to work? I think taxes, subsidies, and things like that kind of fall into that. When you just barely pass the tax bracket. I know that was that story, and I can't remember the name of the book, but Ronald Reagan, where he would only do a certain number of movies every year because if you made more, $1 more, you get taxed at like a 90-something% a rate, and he wanted to keep it. He's like, I would basically have to pay all the money from the third movie. And so why make the third movie or the fourth movie? Because he wasn't going to make any money from it. So those types of motivations, I think, are really important. And sometimes we lose sight of that, but sometimes we need a professional in that there to kind of tell us what to do. But so just finally, before, I'm going to put on here how people can get a hold of you, twocommonwealth.com. So where they can read about the book, purchase a book, get in touch with you if they have any questions or about any of the services that you offer. What types of professionals should they be looking at? Is this covered in the book, the suite of professionals that you should expect to hire? So a financial planner, and then you have like wealth management experts, you have an attorney, but attorneys do all sorts of different things. You got tax attorneys, so accountants, like what is their base level of people that they should have on their team that they should expect to pay some money for once they get past a certain net worth? Maybe it's not $1 million anymore. It's like 2 million before you can afford that stuff. But what suite of advisors should they expect to pay for?
Yeah, I think there's a baseline, right? So I think there's a financial advisor, and hopefully that financial advisor is, if they're focused in only one area and they don't offer comprehensive wealth management, which includes, some of your insurance and your investments and the overall planning, not just investments in there. Maybe look at delving a little deeper with that. Obviously, you have your property and casualty person who will look at your properties and your casualty and your liabilities with that stuff. Your accountant's a tax professional of some sort to make sure that you're filing correctly. And ideally, trying to find a tax professional that's forward thinking and not just this return. And it's really not the tax professional's fault. I think the average American assesses the value that their tax professional provides based on how big your return is this year or how little you pay in. But that can be short-term mindset thinking and can really kick the can down the road to some poor situations further on. And then your like you mentioned, your attorneys, especially around estate issues there. I think everybody, regardless of wealth, if you have kids, for instance, or dependents, having wills set up, having proper power of attorneys, having your healthcare surrogates, your advanced directives. These are things that can tear families apart if not done right. And it's a huge thing, regardless of where your wealth is. And I've seen it. Last thing you want to go through is have to go to a judge who court appoints the guardian, and maybe it's the person that you wanted or not, or whether it's for yourself and your wealth or your kids. I mean, it's a lot there. So, those who, fail to plan to fail. And so there's some truth to that when it comes to estate planning for certain. And then if you have a business, there's CPAs, there's fractional CFOs, there's all kinds of things you can outsource. There's tons of levels of professionals. We do talk about building that team around you in the book. But really at that core, a really solid financial professional that can coordinate and quarterback that and have your back in it. And that's why when interviewing professionals, make sure that you're finding somebody that has that network available to them and also takes the time to get to know your situation individually. So they're understanding what your purpose is and not just looking at, they should ask for your tax statements. If they didn't ask for your tax return last year, then they're already obviously not doing the job. If they're just looking at how to sell you something or how to improve your investments here on the fringes or whatever it may be, that's well and good, but they didn't get to know what your goals are at the end of the day. They're probably missing out, and you're probably not going to take their advice during those downturns if you're just talking about the investment world. So yeah, I mean, there's a good team of investment professionals and professionals in general that you should have when it comes to family meetings and things. I've seen everywhere from large businesses when they're going through a transaction or a transition, bring in behavioral health folks, family therapists, because sometimes you have transactions where one kid is heavily involved or two kids are heavily involved in the business, one's not. And I talk about all of that in the book, how to make things equitable, maybe not fair, but equitable, how to divvy that stuff up and what that might look like in your family dynamics and family governance and creating all those kind of things. So the old rapper, what Biggie Smalls said, mo money, mo problems. And
Yeah.
that's definitely the case sometimes. So so have the right crew around you. Don't think that you can just continue to do it yourself. That TurboTax is fine for some, and so is what are the legal Zoom and all that kind of stuff. But I'd always recommend working with a real professional. So seek that out. And you may not know what you don't know. And I think the crux of the book is, as you read through it, hopefully you nod through and realize, okay, this is a lot of stuff that is understandable and things I've heard of. But it is meant to be a tad bit overwhelming, because the reality is it is overwhelming. And if this isn't your area of expertise, it's okay to go seek some expertise. But it's not a solicitous thing. It's simply a reality. And so not doing so can hurt us. And that's the last thing anybody wants to see for them or their family.
Yeah. And I love what you said about the quarterbacking, because like you have so many professionals you could choose from. Your registered investment advisor versus a certified financial planner. I'm like, no, they're not really the same, probably the same thing. So getting some sort of a coach or some sort of quarterback who can assemble the team, and you don't need them you're not a family office. You don't need them on staff, right? It's just, you need to be able to budget some things towards this every few years. You might need to look at your estate plan again and all this. So understanding that sometimes having more money costs you more money, and that there's a net effect. It's like running a business at that point. Does your revenue justify the expense? And going into it with that standpoint is really, really important. And it's hard for me because I don't want to pay money for anything, right? Like my dad, I don't know, but he was a millionaire when he passed away based on his house and his investments and things like that, probably like right there. And he did his own trust on LegalZoom, and he didn't do it right. And we had to hire an attorney after he passed away and have it redone, because he didn't title things into the trust and some things like that. So it's like, that was a waste of time, and whatever he paid LegalZoom, it was a waste. And so fortunately we were all on the same page, and we were able to sit down as siblings and take care of it in a very equitable and emotionally mature manner. And I remember sitting around the table like, this is going awfully well. Like, I guess you're just never sure where that's going to go, right? So those kinds of things are so important. And I think it's really important for families like ours, especially where we're just at the cusp of that level, and we just don't really have anybody who can walk us through this. So I appreciate you coming on the show. I did put on 2commonwealth.com for people to be able to get a hold of you. I think you've described very well. I always ask like who should get a hold of you after the show, but you've described very well through the whole episode who should get a hold of you. Accredited investors who are looking for help with this. And if you want to get a hold of me, investwithemma.com. I'm like, I don't have a dog in this fight. So I like to just talk to people about their investments and see if I can introduce you to some of the professionals that we have on the show. Reach out to both of us if you need some help. And I really want the show to be about helping you design the life that you're looking for, so that you can think about what you want it to look like. And then the tools we provide help you figure out how to pay for it. And that is our whole mission here at Passive Income Adventures. So I appreciate you spending your time, and I will see you next week for another Passive Income Adventure. And thank you so much for coming on today, George. And hopefully we'll have some people reach out to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for all you do, Emma.
All right. Have a good one.